It started out like any other quiet afternoon. I was folding laundry by the window, the soft warmth of the sun spilling across the floor, when I heard my husband's phone buzz from the table. Nothing unusual. It was always lighting up with something. Emails, sports updates, a group chat with his coworkers. But this time, I glanced over. And just like that, everything shifted. Reservation confirmed for Friday 8 p.m., romantic couples promotion. The words lit up on his lock screen like a secret finally escaping. My heart skipped. No, it danced. I actually covered my mouth with my hand, laughing a little, like a teenager. He remembered. I didn't even think he had. Our anniversary was still a few weeks away, but this had to be his surprise. And God, after everything we'd been through, the long silences, the dinners eaten in front of separate screens, the way he sometimes felt like a roommate, this was something. Maybe even everything. Maybe he was still choosing me. I could barely finish folding the laundry. My mind was already running ahead of me. What would I wear? I hadn't bought anything new for myself in months, but now? I was on every shopping site I could think of, scrolling through dresses like I was planning for prom. I found the perfect one, elegant, navy blue, the kind that hugs you in the right places but still leaves a little mystery. I ordered shoes too. And I started imagining how I'd do my hair, what lipstick I'd wear, how he'd look when he saw me walk in. For the first time in a long time, I felt adored, seen, chosen. The next day, I circled Friday on the calendar like it was a national holiday. I kept it quiet, of course. Didn't mention a thing to him. Part of me wanted to see if he'd keep the surprise going, play it cool until the last minute. Maybe he was planning to take me somewhere special after all these years, and I didn't want to ruin whatever he had up his sleeve. I started daydreaming while doing the most mundane things, in line at the grocery store, while brushing my teeth, folding socks. I imagined us at a candlelit table, fingers grazing, laughter floating between us like it used to. And then there were the shoes. I hadn't worn heels in forever, but I ordered a pair that made me feel powerful, confident. Like the woman I used to be before kids, bills, work, and all the little things that chip away at you one day at a time. I even booked a hair appointment. Nothing drastic, just a blowout, just enough to feel fresh. I was bringing me to that dinner. Not the tired version, not the taken-for-granted version, but the woman who still knew how to turn heads, including his. Each night leading up to Friday, I couldn't help but sneak glances at him across the dinner table. He was on his phone a lot, and I caught myself wondering, is he texting the restaurant? Double-checking the reservation? Thinking about what he'll say when he surprises me? I'd study his face, trying to read between the lines of his silence. And in my heart, I believed, no, I knew, that something beautiful was coming. Something that would remind me that we were still worth the effort. By Thursday night, my outfit was hanging on the closet door like a promise. The shoes sat in their box, tissue paper still half folded, waiting for their moment. I kept imagining how he'd look at me when I stepped into the restaurant, the surprise in his eyes, the pride. Maybe even that old spark I hadn't seen in years. I pictured the clink of wine glasses, his hand reaching for mine across the table, and that look that used to say without words, "You're everything." And I'll be honest, I needed that. Not just the dinner, the feeling. That whisper of romance I thought had vanished under the weight of routine and compromise. I'd given so much of myself to this marriage, to him. And maybe, just maybe, this dinner was his way of saying he saw it, saw me, all the effort, the quiet sacrifices, the loyalty. That little message on his phone felt like a door swinging open after a long winter, letting warmth back in. So when Friday finally arrived, I woke up with butterflies in my stomach, like a teenager before her first date. I had the day all planned out. Nails, hair, time to soak in the bath and breathe in the kind of peace I hadn't felt in ages. Every little detail felt precious. I smiled more that day than I had in months. I kept glancing at the clock, counting down the hours. Because tonight, I believed I'd walk into a moment I'd remember forever. A night just for us. A night I didn't yet know would change everything. By the time Friday afternoon rolled around, I was practically glowing. My nails were done, my hair smooth and full of bounce, and my dress hung on the bathroom door like a secret I was dying to reveal. I even lit one of those candles I'd been saving, the expensive kind, letting its soft vanilla scent drift through the house. Every part of me buzzed with anticipation. I kept waiting for him to say something, anything. But he didn't. Not a word, not a hint, just silence and the sound of the TV. Still, I kept the faith. Maybe he was holding on to the surprise until the last possible moment, like those movie scenes where the guy reveals the plan with a wink and a hand outstretched. I kept watching the clock. 5:30, 6. I touched up my eyeliner. 6:30. I slipped into the dress. My phone stayed by my side the entire time, just in case he texted something sweet or said he was picking me up. At 7, I slipped into my heels. They made a soft click against the hardwood. My heart was beating so fast I could barely breathe. Then, the message came. "Babe, I won't be home for dinner. Grabbing drinks with the guys while we catch the game." That was it. No emoji, no apology, no mention of me. I stared at the screen, blinking like maybe the words would rearrange themselves into something else, something less cruel, less hollow. But they didn't. And I felt something inside me, a thread, snap. I didn't move for a while. Just stood there in my heels and that carefully chosen dress, like a woman frozen in a photograph, mid-smile, mid-dream. My phone still lit in my hand, casting a dull glow on the fabric I'd picked out with so much hope. I read the message again, then again. Grabbing drinks with the guys. Casual, dismissive. Like I didn't exist. Like all the anticipation I'd built up for days was a joke only he wasn't laughing at. That's when the earlier notification flashed through my mind. The reservation. For 2. Friday night, 8 p.m. Romantic couples promotion. That hadn't been a mistake. It hadn't been a mix-up. He had made that reservation, just not for me. I could feel it in my chest, that slow, searing burn that starts as disbelief and quickly turns to something deeper, something sharper. It wasn't sadness that came next, not even heartbreak. It was clarity, cold, electric clarity. I set the phone down slowly, walked to the mirror, looked at the woman staring back at me, polished, glowing, fully dressed for a love story that no longer existed. And something shifted inside me. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. I'd spent too many years loving quietly, forgiving quickly, waiting patiently. Tonight, I would not wait. If he made a reservation for 2, I was going to make sure he remembered exactly who the other woman was supposed to be. I zipped up my dress with hands steadier than they had any right to be. There was no trembling now, no second guessing. I wasn't just getting dressed anymore, I was armoring up. Every curl in my hair, every sweep of mascara, every piece of jewelry I clasped was a silent vow to myself. I will not be invisible tonight. Not to him, not to her, not to anyone who dared to watch this play out. I checked the time. 7:15 p.m. He'd already be there by now, settling in, maybe ordering drinks, maybe even rehearsing the same tired lies he'd told before. But what he didn't know, what he never saw coming, was that I'd be walking through those same doors. Not to plead, not to make a scene, but to be seen. Fully. Fiercely. Without apology. I slipped on my heels again, grabbed my clutch, and looked in the mirror one last time. That woman looking back at me, she wasn't broken. She wasn't small. She was done pretending not to notice, done swallowing her intuition. Tonight, I wasn't going to wait around to be chosen. I was going to show up and let the truth pull out the second chair at that table he thought he could hide in plain sight. I pulled into the parking lot at 7:55 p.m. sharp, not a minute early, not a minute late. The restaurant's soft golden light spilled through the windows, casting everything in a warm, deceptive glow. Romantic, intimate. The kind of place we used to save for anniversaries. I sat in the car for a beat, hand on the ignition, breathing through the quiet storm building inside me. And then I stepped out, not timidly, not nervously, but with purpose, with poise. My heels clicked against the pavement like punctuation marks. The hostess barely looked up before smiling and greeting me, but I didn't need help finding him. I spotted him almost instantly. There by the window, the best table in the house. Of course, he always did like a view. He was sitting back, grinning, talking low across the table. And then I saw her. Blonde, younger. Polished in that effortless, trying a little too hard way. She laughed at something he said and touched his hand. His hand. I didn't feel my heart break. That had already happened. What I felt now was something far more controlled, calculated. I straightened my spine, smoothed my dress, and started walking. One step, then another. People glanced up. Conversations slowed. You could feel the shift in the room as I moved through it, like someone had dimmed the lights and turned up the tension. Every pair of eyes began to follow me, including his. Until I stopped right at their table, looked him dead in the eye, and smiled. He froze, fork midair, smile dying on his face like someone had pulled the plug. His eyes darted around, as if he could somehow rewind the moment, as if there were a version of reality where I wouldn't be standing there, in that dress, in those heels, in front of that woman. And her? She looked up at me like she was trying to place me. Like I might have been a coworker, a friend, a stranger, but I wasn't any of those. I was his wife. I leaned slightly forward, just enough to meet them both on their comfortable little battlefield, and with a coolness that surprised even me, I said, "Oh, I see you did make a reservation for two. Just forgot to tell your wife who the second seat was for." My voice didn't tremble. My hands didn't shake. I delivered the line like I'd rehearsed it, because maybe, somewhere deep down, I had. For years, every ignored instinct, every brushed-off suspicion had been building to this moment. You could have heard a pin drop. The air turned thick. Their waiter, poor thing, stood nearby like he'd walked into the middle of a live soap opera. Phones started coming out discreetly. I saw them in the corners of my vision, little glowing rectangles held low, capturing the scene like it was theater. But I wasn't performing. I was reclaiming, rewriting, standing in my own power with a grace that didn't need to scream. And he knew it. Oh, he knew it. He tried to speak. Some panicked jumble of my name and an excuse half-formed, like his mouth couldn't keep up with the damage already done. I didn't let him finish. I didn't need to hear the lies tumble out again like a script he barely rehearsed. I turned slightly toward her, letting my gaze fall on her manicured hand still resting near his wine glass. She didn't move, didn't breathe. And I saw it, the flash of shame, the instant she realized who I was, who she was. But I didn't yell, I didn't cry. That wasn't the woman who showed up tonight. I stood tall, calm. I simply reached for the wine glass sitting on my husband's table, the one I knew he ordered because it was my favorite. I held it delicately, let it catch the light for a moment, then raised it. To liars, cheaters, and the women smart enough to catch them, I said. My voice was smooth as velvet, the kind that cuts without raising a blade. And then I placed the glass back down, slow, deliberate. I turned, lifted my chin, and walked away with every eye in the room watching. Phones still up, jaws slightly open. I didn't need to look back to know that I'd changed something. Not just in him, not just in her, but in me. That night didn't end the way I expected when I first saw that reservation, but it wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. The silence behind me as I walked out was deafening, the kind that fills a room when people stop breathing just to make sure they don't miss a thing. I didn't rush, I didn't falter. My heels clicked against the floor like a metronome, keeping time with every heartbeat that echoed behind me. I could feel their eyes on my back. Diners, servers, strangers, each one a witness to something they hadn't seen coming when they ordered their appetizers. But I had. I had seen it coming. I just chose for too long not to believe it. Even as I passed the bar, I caught a few stunned expressions. One woman actually smiled at me, a slow, almost reverent nod, like she was silently cheering. And God, that meant more than I can explain. Not pity, not shock, respect. A knowing kind of recognition that only another woman could give. One who'd probably stood in the same heels, holding the same shattered illusion, and decided to stand taller instead of breaking. I reached the door, pushed it open, and the night air hit me like a second wind. It wasn't cold, it was crisp, clean. I closed my eyes for a breath, just one, and let it sink in. What I'd just done, what I'd finally seen, and somewhere behind me, inside that dimly lit restaurant, the wreckage of my silence was still settling. And he was sitting in it, right next to the woman who thought she was stealing a man, until she watched his wife walk out like the show didn't even need an encore. I didn't get far before my phone buzzed again. His name on the screen, a call this time. I let it ring, twice, 3 times. Then I declined it. I stood on the sidewalk in front of that glowing restaurant, traffic humming in the distance, and stared at his name one last time before I blocked the number. Not because I was angry, not because I wanted to punish him, but because I finally understood the difference between being wanted and being respected. And I wasn't going to settle for breadcrumbs anymore. I could see movement through the restaurant's windows, the hushed chaos that follows a scandal. The waiter who'd paused mid-step earlier now speaking with a manager. Guests leaning across their tables to whisper, hands cupped, eyes wide. And right there, still frozen in his chair, was the man I once built a future around, now unraveling one embarrassed breath at a time. He wasn't chasing me. He wasn't storming out to fix it. He was just sitting there, exposed. And the woman? She couldn't even meet his eyes. She was already reaching for her purse, shifting in her seat, looking anywhere but at him. Because that's the thing about affairs. They look so glamorous in the shadows, but they crumble under real light. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to throw a drink or cause a scene. The truth was loud enough all on its own. And in that moment, I knew I'd served it to him the way it needed to be served, hot, humiliating, and in public. As I walked to my car, I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I felt free. For the first time in years, I wasn't shrinking to make someone else comfortable. I wasn't quieting my instincts or questioning my worth. I had faced betrayal head-on, not behind closed doors, not in whispered arguments at midnight, but in full view of the world. And I walked away with my dignity intact and my head high. Let them talk. Let them post. I had nothing to hide anymore. When I slid into the driver's seat, my reflection caught in the rearview mirror. There I was, not the woman he thought would fall apart, not the woman who used to beg for scraps of affection, but me. Strong, certain, still beautiful, but not because of the makeup or the dress, because of the fire in my chest that refused to die, even after years of being dimmed. I smiled at her. The woman in the mirror. I hadn't seen her in a long, long time. As I pulled out of the parking lot, my notifications were already buzzing. I didn't even check them. I didn't need validation. The victory wasn't online. It was in how I showed up, in how I left, in how I didn't break when I had every reason to. But I had no idea what was waiting for me when I finally looked at my phone the next morning. What started as a quiet confrontation was already becoming something much, much bigger. I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating across the nightstand, not once, not twice, but like it was begging to be noticed. I rubbed my eyes, reached for it, expecting maybe a string of desperate messages from him. But what I saw stopped me cold. My name, everywhere, texts, mentions, screenshots. A friend had sent a link to a video. I clicked it. And there I was, clear as day, striding through the restaurant like a woman with nothing left to lose or prove. My voice steady. My toast, perfectly delivered. It had been recorded from someone's phone at the next table, shaky, raw, but utterly cinematic. By sunrise, it had already spread like wildfire. Wife crashes romantic dinner in the most elegant takedown ever. That was the headline. I watched myself walk away on screen, heels clicking, shoulders back, the whole restaurant watching. And suddenly, so was the world. I started getting messages from strangers, women, older, younger, some crying, some cheering, some saying, "I wish I had done what you did." Even the restaurant staff messaged me. One of the servers, a young woman probably still in college, thanked me for showing what strength looks like without raising your voice. She said it was the most iconic thing she'd ever witnessed. And then came the flowers. A bouquet from the restaurant itself, no note from management, just a card that said, "Thank you for reminding everyone what self-respect looks like." I stood there holding those flowers in my kitchen, laughing, crying, shaking my head. I had no idea my heartbreak would turn into a revolution. By noon, I'd lost count of the messages. Former co-workers I hadn't spoken to in years were reaching out, telling me how proud they were. Women from other countries, bloggers, podcasters. One message stood out. A woman in her 60s wrote, "You spoke for all of us who stayed silent too long." That hit me in a place I hadn't let anyone touch in years, because this wasn't just about one dinner or one betrayal. It was about all the nights I'd convinced myself it wasn't that bad, all the times I'd swallowed my voice to keep the peace. I filed for divorce that week, quietly, cleanly. There was no dramatic fight, no screaming match. Just papers signed, a ring slipped off my finger, and a chapter closing that had needed to end long ago. He tried, of course. Tried to spin it, tried to call. But what do you say when the whole world saw who you really were? I didn't need revenge. I didn't need him to grovel. I already had everything I needed. Peace, clarity, and an inbox full of dinner invites from people who'd seen my power, not my pain. It was strange the way people reacted. Some treated me like a hero, others like a cautionary tale. But I didn't care. I wasn't here to be anyone's symbol. I was just done disappearing. And if my story lit a fire in someone else, gave another woman the courage to stand up, walk away, say enough, then maybe all those years of trying to hold a crumbling marriage together weren't wasted after all. Maybe they led me here. A week later, I sat on my porch with a glass of wine, my favorite, finally uncorked for me. No occasion. No performance. Just stillness. The sun was low, casting everything in that golden hour kind of honesty. I scrolled through the final headlines, the comments, the reposts. People had given it all kinds of names. The classiest takedown of the decade. The quiet storm in stilettos. One podcast called it a masterclass in self-respect. But what no one saw, what no camera caught, was what came next. Healing didn't look like a fairy tale. It looked like quiet mornings, fresh coffee. Empty rooms that no longer echoed with lies. I started writing again. I started laughing again. I started feeling like myself again. Not the woman who waited for scraps of attention, but the woman who made a table for herself when she wasn't offered a seat. And somehow, out of the humiliation, came a strange and radiant pride. I hadn't just caught him. I'd caught myself, before I lost her completely. So yes, he made a reservation. For two. Romantic, intimate, just not with me. But what he didn't know, what he never saw coming, was that I'd turn his cheap secret into a moment that reached thousands. A moment that said, "You don't get to write the ending." And as I sat there on my porch, watching the sky turn orange and violet, I whispered the final line out loud. Not for him, not for the world, but for me. He thought he reserved a table for romance, but I gave him a seat at his own downfall.